I hadn't planned on being home that night. Wednesdays were always reserved for my night out. A quiet dinner, a couple of beers with Alex, and then a slow drive home to clear my head. It was a routine Jessica encouraged. "Everyone needs their space," she'd say, and I'd taken her at her word. But Alex canceled last minute, leaving me with a choice: go out alone or head back early. The rain had started by then, and the thought of sitting in a bar by myself felt hollow. So, I drove home, my headlights slicing through the darkness as I replayed the day in my head. When I opened the front door, I expected quiet. Jessica usually worked late on Wednesdays, catching up on whatever marketing campaigns were driving her insane that week. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was off. Her shoes, the red ones she never wore unless it was a special occasion, were sitting neatly by the door. Her coat was draped over the chair, damp from the rain. She was home, but she hadn't texted or called, and there was no familiar hum of the TV in the background. I heard a muffled laugh coming from upstairs. A man's laugh. The sound hit me like a slap, disorienting and absurd. My first thought was that I was imagining things. Maybe it was a movie or some ad playing on her phone. But then I heard her voice, soft, teasing, and unmistakably hers. Without thinking, I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart hammering so loudly I couldn't hear anything else. The door to our bedroom was ajar. Light spilled out into the hallway, warm and golden. But there was nothing warm about what I saw when I pushed the door open. Jessica was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to me, wearing one of those dresses she used to save for our anniversary dinners. Across from her, lounging casually in my chair, was a man I didn't recognize. He was older, with graying hair and a smugness that made my blood boil. His tie was loosened, and he held a glass of whiskey in one hand like he owned the place. Neither of them noticed me at first. She was laughing at something he'd said, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. Her hand was resting on his knee, and his hand was on her thigh. I stepped into the room, and everything stopped. Jessica froze, her laughter dying in her throat as she turned to look at me. The man didn't flinch. He just leaned back, took a slow sip of his drink, and smirked like he'd been waiting for this moment. "What's going on here?" My voice was steady, colder than I thought it would be. Jessica stood quickly, smoothing her dress as if that would erase the scene I just walked into. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, her face flushing. "Really? Because it looks like you're entertaining a guest. In our bedroom." The man stood up then, straightening his tie with deliberate slowness. "I should probably go," he said, his voice calm, almost amused. "You're not going anywhere," I snapped, stepping in front of him. My hands were clenched into fists at my sides, every muscle in my body screaming at me to do something I wasn't sure I'd regret. Jessica grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Don't," she said sharply, her voice low. "Don't what?" I turned to her, the anger finally breaking through. "Don't ask who this is. Don't ask why he's in my house, drinking my whiskey, with his hands all over you. It's not like that," she shouted, her eyes wild with panic. "We were just talking." "Talking?" I laughed bitterly, cutting her off. "That's what you're calling it?" She opened her mouth to say something else, but I didn't let her. "Who is he, Jessica? And don't you dare lie to me." The man, clearly bored with the theatrics, stepped forward, extending a hand like we were at some cocktail party. "Jason," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Jessica and I, well, let's just say we go way back." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I looked at Jessica, waiting for her to explain. She didn't. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until Jason finally shrugged and walked past me, heading for the door. "I'll let you two work this out," he said over his shoulder. The audacity of his indifference was too much. I grabbed his arm, spinning him around. "If I see you here again—" "You won't," he interrupted, his smirk never wavering. "She'll come to me," Jessica gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. But she didn't deny it, and that hurt more than anything else. The door slammed behind Jason, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. For a moment, everything was silent except for the rain hammering against the windows. Jessica stood frozen in the middle of the room, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly. I wanted to speak, but the words felt too big to fit in my mouth. Rage clawed at the back of my throat, tangled with disbelief and something else I couldn't name. When I finally did say something, my voice sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. "You're not even going to deny it, are you?" She looked at me then, her eyes glassy, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the right words and failing. "Who is he, Jessica?" "The truth. All of it. Now." Her lips trembled, and for a moment, I thought she might actually cry. But then something shifted in her face. An edge of defiance, a flicker of anger that I didn't expect. "He's someone who listens to me," she snapped, her voice sharp. "Someone who makes me feel like I matter." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What the hell is that supposed to mean? You matter to me. You're my wife. For God's sake." "Am I?" she shot back, stepping toward me now, her eyes blazing. "Because I've felt like nothing more than a roommate for months. You're always so busy with work, or your stupid routines, or God knows what else. When was the last time you even asked how I was doing?" I blinked, stunned by the sudden attack. "Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. I work to support us. I've always been there for you. Physically, maybe," she interrupted, crossing her arms. "But emotionally, you checked out a long time ago." The sheer audacity of her words left me speechless. This wasn't a confession. It was an attempt to shift the blame, to paint herself as the victim while she was the one tearing our marriage apart. "So this is my fault?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "I pushed you into his arms? Is that what you're saying?" Her silence was answer enough. I turned away from her, running a hand through my hair as I tried to process everything. My pulse was pounding in my ears, my vision blurred with rage and something dangerously close to grief. "How long?" I asked, my back still to her. "What? How long?" She hesitated, and I knew she was deciding whether to lie or tell the truth. 2 months, she finally said, her voice small. 2 months. 8 weeks. 60 days. While I'd been going about my life, trusting her, loving her, she'd been sneaking around behind my back. "Unbelievable," I muttered, shaking my head. "You've been sneaking around for 2 months, and you didn't think I'd notice?" "I didn't want you to notice," she said, her tone defensive again. "Because I didn't want to hurt you. I was just, I don't know, trying to figure things out." "Figure things out?" I repeated, spinning around to face her. "You don't figure things out by crawling into bed with another man, Jessica. You talk to your husband. You fix what's broken instead of lighting the whole damn house on fire." She flinched at my words, but the defiance in her eyes didn't waver. "It wasn't like that," she said softly. "It wasn't just about what you're thinking." Jason made me feel alive again. He reminded me of who I used to be before. "Before what?" I demanded. "Before you decided that the life we built together wasn't enough for you?" Her silence felt heavier than any answer she could have given. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and unfamiliar. "You know what the worst part is? I would have done anything to fix this. If you just told me you were unhappy, I would have listened. But you didn't even give me that chance, did you? You just ran straight to him." "I didn't plan for this to happen," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't wake up one day and decide to hurt you." "Then why did you?" I shouted, the anger finally spilling over. "Why wasn't I enough for you?" Tears filled her eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I'd spent years pouring everything I had into our marriage, believing we were a team, that we'd face the world together. And now, here we were, broken, shattered, and barely recognizable. Jessica stepped closer, reaching for my arm, but I pulled away. "Don't," I said coldly. "Don't touch me." She froze, her hand hovering in the air before she let it fall to her side. For the first time that night, she looked small, like the weight of her choices had finally settled on her shoulders. "I think you should leave," I said quietly, my voice raw. "What? You heard me?" I said, meeting her gaze. "Pack a bag and go. I can't even look at you right now." Her face crumpled, but she didn't argue. Without another word, she turned and left the room, leaving me standing alone in the wreckage of what I thought was our life. The rain outside had stopped, but inside, the storm was just beginning. Jessica left that night, dragging a small suitcase behind her like some cliché in a bad movie. The sound of the wheels rolling down the hallway was deafening. I didn't stop her. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, watching the door click shut, leaving behind an emptiness I couldn't describe. I stayed awake until dawn. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with Jason. The way she'd laughed. The way she'd looked at me like I was the intruder in my own home. By morning, the house felt like a stranger. A hollow, lifeless thing that echoed with every creak and groan. I was about to drag myself upstairs when I heard a knock at the door. My first thought was Jessica, back to beg for forgiveness or finish the fight we started. But when I opened it, I wasn't met with her tear-streaked face. Instead, there was a police officer standing on my porch. "Mr. Callahan?" he asked, his tone professional but cautious. "Yeah," I said, confused. "What's going on?" The officer hesitated for a moment, glancing past me into the house like he was looking for something, or someone. "We received a call about a possible disturbance here last night. Your wife contacted us." I froze, the words not making sense at first. "Jessica called you?" "She reported a domestic dispute," the officer continued. "She claimed you were aggressive and that she feared for her safety." Aggressive? Feared for her safety? My mind raced, trying to piece together the events of the night before. Yes, we'd argued. Yes, I'd raised my voice. But I hadn't laid a hand on her. Not even when every fiber of my being had begged me to shove Jason out the door. "That's not true," I said firmly. "I didn't touch her. She left on her own, and she wasn't scared. She was just angry because I found out about her affair." The officer's expression didn't change, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. "Is there anyone who can corroborate your version of events?" "Corroborate," I repeated, my voice rising. "No, because it's just me here. Look, I don't know what she told you, but this is insane. I didn't do anything to her." The officer nodded slowly, taking out a small notepad. "I understand, sir, but I still need to make a report. Can I come in?" I let him in, still too stunned to fully process what was happening. As he walked through the house, he asked questions: what had happened, how the argument started, what exactly Jessica had accused me of. I answered as honestly as I could, my frustration growing with every word. "She's trying to make me the villain," I said finally, my hands clenched into fists. "She cheats on me, lies to me, and then calls the cops to make herself look like the victim." The officer didn't respond, just kept writing. When he was done, he looked at me with the same neutral expression he'd worn since he arrived. "We'll follow up with your wife," he said. "For now, I suggest you avoid contacting her directly. Let things cool down." "Cool down," I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "She's the one who—" "Sir," he interrupted, his tone firm. "I understand this is a difficult situation, but it's in your best interest to stay calm and cooperative." I bit back the retort sitting on the tip of my tongue and nodded. The last thing I needed was for this mess to spiral even further out of control. The officer left soon after, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the weight of what had just happened. Jessica had crossed a line I didn't even know existed. She hadn't just betrayed me. She tried to destroy me. Hours passed in a blur of anger and disbelief. I didn't know what to do or where to start. My phone buzzed a few times, but I didn't bother looking at it. Whoever it was, I didn't have the energy to talk. It wasn't until evening that the next blow landed. I heard the sound of tires crunching on gravel and saw the familiar flash of red and blue lights outside. I opened the door, expecting the same officer as before. Instead, 2 officers stood there this time, their expressions grim. "Mr. Callahan," one of them said, his hand resting on the radio clipped to his shoulder. "We're here to follow up on the report from earlier. Can we come in?" My heart sank. This wasn't over. Not even close. Jessica had thrown the first punch, and now it felt like the walls were closing in on me. The officers stepped inside, their heavy boots echoing on the hardwood floor. One of them, a tall man with a closely cropped beard, looked around the living room like he was assessing a crime scene. The other, a younger woman with sharp eyes, was carrying a notepad, ready to record everything I said. I felt the anger simmering beneath my skin, but I forced myself to stay calm. Any wrong move could make this worse. "Mr. Callahan," the female officer began, her tone professional but not unkind. "We spoke with your wife earlier this afternoon. Based on her statement, there are some allegations we need to discuss." "What allegations?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She glanced at her partner, then back at me. "She claimed that during your argument last night, you became physically aggressive. She mentioned that you grabbed her arm and threatened her." The words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and toxic. "That's a lie," I said firmly. "I never touched her. I didn't threaten her either. She's twisting things to make herself look innocent." The male officer stepped in then, his voice calm but firm. "We're not here to make judgments, sir. We're just here to gather information. Do you mind walking us through what happened last night, step by step?" I did. Again. I told them about Jason, about walking in on the two of them, about the argument that followed. I kept my voice steady, even as the anger bubbled beneath the surface. "And you're saying there was no physical contact?" the female officer asked, her pen hovering over her notepad. "None," I said, my jaw tightening. "She left because I asked her to. That's it." There was a long pause as they exchanged another look. Then the male officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Callahan, do you have any idea why your wife might make these claims?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Yeah, I do. She's trying to cover her tracks. She's been having an affair, and now that I've caught her, she's doing whatever she can to make herself look like the victim." The female officer scribbled something down, her expression neutral. "Do you have any evidence of the affair?" "Evidence?" I repeated, the question catching me off guard. "Yes," she said patiently. "Messages, photos, anything that might support your side of the story." I thought of Jessica's phone, the message from Jason. But I hadn't taken a screenshot. I hadn't even thought to. At the time, I'd been too stunned to think about proof. "No," I admitted reluctantly. "But I know what I saw." The officers exchanged another glance, and I felt my stomach tighten. This wasn't going well. "Mr. Callahan," the male officer said carefully, "I'm going to be honest with you. In situations like this, it often comes down to one person's word against the others. If your wife decides to press charges, things could get complicated." "Press charges?" I repeated, my voice rising. "For what?" "For something I didn't do." "Calm down, sir," the female officer said, her tone firm but calm. "No charges have been filed yet, but we need to advise you to avoid contact with your wife for the time being. That includes phone calls, texts, or showing up at her workplace. Do you understand?" I nodded, the frustration boiling inside me like a volcano about to erupt. They left soon after, leaving me alone in the house that now felt more like a prison. I sat on the couch, my mind racing. Jessica wasn't just lying. She was trying to ruin me. And for what? To protect her affair? To justify her actions? Or was it something darker, something calculated? I didn't have answers, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. If she wanted a war, she'd picked the wrong man to cross. Just as I was piecing together my next move, my phone buzzed. For a second, I thought it might be Jessica, but the number was unfamiliar. I answered hesitantly. "Hello, Callahan," a male voice said, low and serious. "This is Jason." My blood went cold. "What the hell do you want?" I spat, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "I think it's time we talked," he said, his tone infuriatingly calm. "Man to man, there's something you need to know." My jaw clenched. "You've got 2 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't hang up right now." There was a pause, and then he said the last thing I ever expected to hear. "Jessica's been lying to both of us." The words hit me like a freight train, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jason sighed, his tone laced with frustration. "She didn't tell you about the money, did she?" "Money? The money she's been siphoning from your account," he said bluntly. "I thought she was using it to leave you. Turns out, she's been playing me too." I froze, the world spinning around me. Jessica wasn't just cheating. She was stealing. From me. From us. From everything we'd built. The avalanche had started, and I had no idea how to stop it. The phone felt hot in my hand, Jason's words still hanging in the air. Money? Siphoning? My mind raced, grasping for something solid, some piece of reality that hadn't been completely turned upside down. "You're lying," I said finally, though my voice betrayed my uncertainty. Jason chuckled bitterly. "Trust me, I wish I was. She's been using both of us, Callahan. If you don't believe me, check your accounts. I'm sure you'll find a few surprises waiting for you." I wanted to hang up, to scream, to find Jessica and demand answers. But something in Jason's tone, the raw frustration, the anger, stopped me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice cold. "What's your angle?" "My angle," Jason repeated, his voice rising. "I'm out 10 grand, Callahan. 10 grand. She told me she needed it for legal fees. Said you were some abusive bastard who wouldn't let her leave. And like an idiot, I believed her." My stomach twisted. "She said what?" "You heard me," Jason snapped. "She played me, just like she's playing you. I don't give a damn about your marriage, but I'm not letting her get away with this. I thought you deserved to know." The call ended abruptly, leaving me standing in the middle of the living room with my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to believe him. I didn't want to think that Jessica, the woman I'd loved, trusted, shared my life with, could be capable of something like this. But the doubts were already there, festering like an open wound. I grabbed my laptop and logged into our joint bank account, my hands trembling as I typed in the password. At first, everything looked normal. The balances were roughly where I expected them to be. But as I started scrolling through the transaction history, my stomach dropped. There it was. Over the past 3 months, thousands of dollars had been withdrawn, always in small increments, just enough to avoid drawing attention. The descriptions were vague. Online transfer, ATM withdrawal, miscellaneous expense. My heart raced as I opened another tab to check my personal account. More of the same. Money siphoned out systematically, like clockwork. Jason was telling the truth. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. This wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated, premeditated theft. Jessica had been stealing from me, from us, while pretending everything was fine. The rage that had been simmering inside me exploded. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. She answered on the second ring. "What do you want?" she said, her tone sharp and defensive. "I want answers," I growled. "Now." "Answers to what?" she asked, feigning innocence. "Don't play dumb with me, Jessica," I snapped. "I know about the money, the withdrawals, the transfers, all of it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought she might hang up. But then she spoke, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "You were going to find out eventually," she said. My blood ran cold. "You're not even denying it? Why bother?" she said, her tone laced with disdain. "You want to hear the truth? Fine. I took the money. I had to. Because you were never going to give me what I deserved." "What you deserved?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What the hell are you talking about?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Do you have any idea how miserable I've been? Stuck in this house, watching you play the perfect husband while I withered away? I needed a way out, and you weren't going to give it to me. So you decided to steal from me?" I shouted, my anger boiling over. "You decided to lie, cheat, and then try to ruin my life? You ruined your own life," she shot back. "You're the one who drove me to this. You're the one who made me feel like I was nothing." The sheer audacity of her words left me stunned. I'd spent years working to build a life for us, sacrificing my time, my energy, everything I had to make her happy. And now she was blaming me for her betrayal? "You're unbelievable," I said finally, my voice trembling with rage. "You think this is my fault? You think you're the victim here?" She didn't respond. "You're done, Jessica," I said, my tone icy. "I'm calling the bank. I'm calling a lawyer. And when I'm done, you'll have nothing left. Do whatever you want," she said, her voice dripping with indifference. "You were never going to win this, Callahan. I've already made sure of that." The call ended with a click, leaving me sitting there, seething. She wasn't just trying to hurt me. She was trying to destroy me. But she'd underestimated me. If she thought I was going to roll over and let her win, she didn't know me at all. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Jessica thought she had me cornered. She thought she'd painted me into a cage of lies, betrayal, and accusations. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't the same man she'd been manipulating for months. Something had broken inside me, but instead of crumbling, I was sharpening. The first call I made was to the bank. After an hour of holding and explaining the situation, I finally got through to a fraud investigator. I outlined the unauthorized withdrawals, the transfers, and her deliberate attempts to siphon money from our accounts without my consent. It wasn't easy. Jessica's name was on some of those accounts, but when I mentioned that the funds had been moved to her personal accounts, the investigator assured me they'd freeze everything until they completed their review. "You'll need to file a formal complaint," she said. "And if this involves marital disputes, I'd advise contacting an attorney as soon as possible." "I'm already on it," I replied, the calm in my voice surprising even me. The second call was to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a shark. Someone who knew how to deal with this level of betrayal and wouldn't blink at the idea of dragging Jessica through the mud if it came to that. By the time I hung up, the plan was in motion. I'd meet with him in person the next day, and he'd start preparing the paperwork to file for divorce. But there was one more thing I needed to do. Jason's words from our call earlier still lingered in my mind. "She's been playing both of us." As much as I hated him, I knew he wasn't lying. And if Jessica had taken 10 grand from him, too, he had every reason to want to see her go down. I needed proof, something I could use to show the world exactly who she was. I texted him, short and to the point. "Meet me. We need to talk." He responded almost immediately. "Tonight. Neutral ground. There's a bar on Fremont. 8 p.m. I didn't want to see him, but I needed his cooperation. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about taking back control. By 8 p.m., I was at the bar, nursing a whiskey I didn't really want. The place was dimly lit, noisy enough to guarantee privacy, but not so chaotic that we couldn't talk. Jason arrived a few minutes later, looking as tired and angry as I felt. "You came," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I don't have time for small talk," I said flatly. "What do you know?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "A lot more than I wish I did." Over the next 20 minutes, Jason spilled everything. How Jessica had played the damsel in distress, feeding him stories about how controlling and abusive I supposedly was. How she'd used those lies to justify asking him for money, to escape me, as she put it. "She even showed me fake bruises," he admitted, his jaw tightening. "She had makeup or something, made it look real. I bought it like an idiot." I clenched my fists under the table, struggling to contain my fury. The level of deceit was staggering. "Do you have anything to prove it?" I asked. "Messages? Bank records? Anything?" Jason nodded, pulling out his phone. "I kept everything after I realized what was happening. I've got texts, emails, receipts, hell, even photos she sent me of the so-called bruises." He handed me the phone, and I scrolled through the messages, my anger intensifying with every word. Jessica had spun an elaborate web of lies, playing the victim while systematically draining him, and me, for everything we were worth. "This is exactly what I need," I said, my voice cold. "I'm going to bury her with this." Jason hesitated. "Look, man, I want her to pay as much as you do. But if this goes public, it's going to get messy. For both of us. Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I don't have a choice," I said. "She's already called the cops on me. She's trying to ruin my life. I'm not going to sit back and let her win." He nodded, his expression grim. "Then let's make sure she doesn't." By the time I got home, I had everything I needed to start dismantling Jessica's house of cards. Messages, financial records, proof of her lies. It was all there, neatly organized and ready to be handed over to my lawyer. But as I sat in the dark, staring at the evidence, a new thought crept into my mind. Jessica wasn't just a cheater or a liar. She was dangerous. She had no limits, no line she wouldn't cross to get what she wanted. And that meant I couldn't just defend myself. I had to go on the offensive. Tomorrow, the battle would begin. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I was stepping into a war zone. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Jessica had made her move, and now it was my turn. My first stop was my lawyer's office. His name was Daniel Crane, a man in his late 40s with a sharp suit and an even sharper intellect. When I walked in and handed him the evidence Jason had given me, his eyebrows shot up. "Wow," he muttered, flipping through the screenshots and bank statements. "Your wife really went for the jugular, didn't she?" "She's not my wife anymore," I said, my voice cold. Daniel looked up at me, a glint of approval in his eyes. "Good, because with this," he said, holding up Jason's messages, "we've got leverage. A lot of it. Fraud, defamation, financial misconduct. This isn't just divorce material. This could lead to criminal charges if you want to go that route." "Criminal charges?" I repeated, the words tasting strange. "She stole from you," he said, leaning back in his chair. "She fabricated abuse claims. If you're willing to press charges, we could make her life very uncomfortable." I hesitated. The thought of dragging Jessica into court, exposing every lie and manipulation, was tempting. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure she couldn't do this to anyone else. "What's the downside?" I asked finally. "Publicity," Daniel said bluntly. "If this goes to court, it'll be messy. She might try to paint herself as the victim again, and even with the evidence, public opinion can be unpredictable. But if you're ready for the fight, I'm ready to back you." I thought about it for a long moment. Jessica had crossed so many lines, done so much damage. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about exposing the truth. "Do it," I said finally. "File the charges. I want this on record." Daniel nodded, already scribbling notes. "Consider it done. Now what about the divorce? Are you looking to settle quickly? Or do you want to make this a full-blown case?" "Make it a case," I said without hesitation. "She deserves to lose everything." He grinned, the kind of grin that made me glad he was on my side. "Understood. Let's get to work." By the time I left Daniel's office, the wheels were in motion. The charges were being filed, the divorce paperwork was being drafted, and Jessica's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. But I wasn't done yet. I drove to the bank, determined to get every detail about the withdrawals and transfers Jessica had made. The fraud investigator I'd spoken to the day before met me in a small office, her expression professional but sympathetic. "Mr. Callahan," she said as I sat down, "I've reviewed the accounts and you were right. There's a clear pattern of unauthorized activity over the past few months. We've flagged all related transactions and frozen the accounts to prevent further access." "Can you trace where the money went?" I asked. She nodded. "Most of it went to a personal account under your wife's name. But there were also transfers to a secondary account that we've linked to another individual." My stomach tightened. "Jason Klein?" "Yes," she confirmed. "It looks like some of the funds were transferred to him directly, likely under the pretense of repaying loans or shared expenses." I clenched my fists, the anger simmering just below the surface. "What happens now?" "We'll provide this information to law enforcement as part of the fraud investigation," she said. "You may also want to bring this to your attorney's attention. It could strengthen your case." "I already have," I said, standing up. "Thank you for your help." That evening, I sat in the living room, surrounded by stacks of evidence. Bank records, screenshots, legal documents. It was all there, a paper trail of Jessica's deceit. My phone buzzed on the table, and when I picked it up, I saw a message from an unknown number. "I hear you've been busy. Careful, Callahan. You don't want to make me your enemy." It didn't take a genius to figure out who it was from. "Jessica." I laughed bitterly, my fingers flying across the screen as I typed my response. "You're not my enemy, Jessica. You're my example." Her reply came almost instantly. "You don't scare me. I've got nothing to lose." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. She was wrong. She had everything to lose, and I was going to make sure she lost it. As I sat there, the weight of everything pressing down on me, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. Jessica had underestimated me, just like she'd underestimated Jason, the bank, and everyone else she'd deceived. This wasn't just a fight anymore, it was a reckoning. And it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Jessica underestimated how fast the world can turn against someone when the truth is exposed. By the end of the week, everything I had set in motion began to bear fruit, and her web of lies started unraveling in ways even I didn't anticipate. The first blow came when Daniel filed the fraud charges. Jessica had stolen thousands from me, and with the bank's records and Jason's testimony, we had undeniable proof. When the papers were served at her new apartment, she called me furious. "You're really doing this?" she hissed. "I told you, Jessica, this isn't a game. You made your choices, and now you're dealing with the consequences. You're a spiteful, pathetic man," she spat. I didn't even flinch. "And you're a thief, a liar, and a cheater. So, I guess we're even." She hung up on me, but I wasn't done. The next strike was the divorce. Daniel had crafted a brutal case. With the evidence of her affair, the fraudulent withdrawals, and her attempts to smear me with false accusations, she was in no position to fight. When we met for mediation, she looked like a shadow of herself, her confidence replaced by a simmering rage she could barely contain. "I'll fight you in court," she snarled. "You think you can take everything from me? You already took everything from yourself," I said calmly, sliding a folder across the table. "This is your last chance to settle. If we go to court, everything comes out. The money, the affair, the fake abuse claims. Everyone will know who you really are." Her lawyer leaned over, glancing at the folder. I could see his face tighten as he skimmed the evidence. "You need to consider this carefully," he murmured to her, low enough that only she could hear. Jessica's jaw clenched, her nails digging into the table as she stared at me with pure hatred. For a moment, I thought she might flip the table and storm out. But then she nodded curtly. "Fine," she muttered. "What do you want?" "I want this to end," I said. "You'll sign over your share of the house to me. You'll pay back every cent you stole, starting with what you took from Jason. And you'll issue a written retraction of your abuse allegations. Publicly." Her eyes widened. "You're insane." "No, Jessica," I said, leaning forward. "I'm done being the fool you thought I was. You want to drag this out? Be my guest. But if we go to court, you'll lose everything." She looked at her lawyer, who nodded grimly. "This is extortion," she hissed. "This is justice," I replied. A week later, she signed the papers. The settlement was brutal for her. She forfeited any claim to the house, agreed to repay the stolen money, and issued a public statement retracting her abuse allegations. Watching her press release go live was a moment I'll never forget. It read, "I deeply regret the false accusations I made against my husband, Andrew Callahan. These statements were made in a moment of anger and were not based in fact. I take full responsibility for my actions and the harm they may have caused." It wasn't enough to fix the damage she'd done, but it was a start. The final blow came from Jason. After our conversation at the bar, he decided to take legal action of his own. He filed a lawsuit against Jessica for fraud, using the same evidence he'd provided me. She was blindsided, unprepared for the double attack. I heard through Daniel that her life was spiraling. She'd lost her job, her reputation was in tatters, and the financial strain of 2 lawsuits was more than she could handle. A month later, I stood in my house, finally at peace. It wasn't the home it used to be. Jessica's absence was a gaping void I couldn't quite fill, but it was mine again. The ordeal had changed me. I wasn't the man I used to be, the one who trusted blindly and loved without limits. But I wasn't bitter either. I'd learned the hard way that even the people closest to you can betray you, and that the only way to survive is to fight back. Jessica had tried to destroy me, but in the end, she'd only destroyed herself. And I was still standing.